Welcome to everybody. I'm Mario Speranza. I'm the past president of the International Society of Adolescent Psychiatry and Psychology. I'm very happy to introduce to you a new initiative of the isapp, a series of webinars on adolescent mental health that will be proposed by the society and broadcast on Zoom. We have the privilege to have as our first speaker Professor Füsun Çetin Şuadaroglu, which is the new president of the International Society of Adolescent Psychiatry and Psychology. And as the first webinar, she decided to explain why it's important to have a specific activities, scientific activity, focused on adolescent mental health and psychiatry. This will be the first webinar, and we would like to have a series of webinars every 2 or 3 months. And the society is also proposing a training on specifically adolescent mental health. And we hope that we will share our interest and participate in all these activities that we will be communicated via the isapp websites, which is our way of communicating and diffusing the information concerning our society. I will put the address of the website on the chat box. So to start, I would like to thanks a lot Füsun to have taken the presidency of the society and to start this first webinar of the isapp. Thank you, Füsun.
Well, thanks, Mario, for the introduction. I'm Füsun Çetin Şuadaroglu. I'm a child and adolescent psychiatrist and psychodynamic psychotherapist working mostly with adolescents, and it's been for a very long time. So we'll talk about why we need adolescent mental health and psychiatry. What is, I can't, okay. So, and what makes adolescence unique? I'm going to talk under these headings: historical perspectives, developmental characteristics, special mental health needs of adolescents, social requirements, prevalence of psychiatric disorders in this stage, and clinical characteristics and consequences of adolescent mental health problems in adulthood. So the history of adolescence actually goes back to to the age of early Greek philosophers like Plato and Aristotle. It first appeared in the 15th century in theoretical considerations about nature of human development. And 20th century then is called the age of adolescence because of the legislation for youth was come up at the end of 19th century and at the beginning of 20th century. And the adolescence as a term was first used to define a developmental stage by Stanley Hall in 1916. And then other people contributed to the development of both the term, the meaning of the term, and also defining the developmental stage. Hall's theory of recapitulation, that's what he calls, says that human history is a repetition of the development. And adolescence corresponds to a time when the human race was in turbulent transitional stage. And he mentions that adolescence means a new birth, higher and more completely human traits are now born at this stage. And it's considered the period from puberty to full adult status, as we all know. And he stated that it ends at 22, 25 years. But we know now, in late years, that the adolescence actually extended over 25. And by this theory of emerging adulthood, now we know it goes up to 30s even. Talking about the developmental characteristics specific to this phase, biological development is very important, of course, and where we consider the physical growth, new hormones and drugs, and adolescent brain development especially. I'll say a few things about the brain development. The brain, as physical growth enters a rapid phase, so does the brain. And pruning and myelinization during puberty and adolescence is very important because it increases the functionality of the brain. And higher level mental abilities now continue to mature, like language, decision-making, high-level social understanding. And maturation of thoughtful, effortful control of behavior is gained. That is by the development of the prefrontal cortex especially. And they gain enhanced reward-seeking, exploration, and also risk-taking. And enhanced flexibility in learning and adapting to new environments is observed. Coming to cognitive processes, which is also, as a consequence of the brain development, also improves. And we know that this is the last stage in intelligence development. That is, the cognitive processes reaches its peak in adolescence, and IQ peaks in adolescence, and it doesn't, go up after adolescence, after the age of 18 or 20. And though they now have better reasoning and ability to make decisions, but they don't have yet enough experiences. Thus, they are not able to make true decisions or correct decisions all the time, and they may be mistaken many times. And this is, people working with adolescents will know that an issue which causes problems between the parents and the teenager most of the time. And development of the perception of time concept is very important. It is not only a cognitive process, but it also induces the psychological development in adolescence. With the perception of time, they understand the time concept along with it, the human mortality. And then they start thinking about life, about themselves, and it contributes a lot to the development of identity processes as well. And they develop a future perspective, which is also important for a healthy individual. Psychological wise, adolescence is a very critical period for mental, social, and emotional well-being and development. And developmental changes in the brain lead also to the behavior patterns that will last into adulthood. So what they will have as behavioral habits that will continue. And engaging in risky and thrill-seeking behaviors more than either younger children or adults they're engaged. An example of that. Erik Erikson, is a psychoanalyst who wrote most important books and papers about adolescence. And he states that adolescence is both a period of opportunity for the resolution of the unresolved developmental conflicts of childhood, and also a period when the precursors of the conflicts of the future stages of development are experienced. That means adolescence has connections both with the past and the future of the individual's life. This is one of the very important uniqueness of this stage as well. And there are some specific tasks of adolescence which the children don't have, or the adults. That is the body image development, and development of a sense of identity, emotion regulation, integration of self-image, enhancement of the self-esteem, separation and individuation from the family, and preparing for the adult roles are some to mention. And along with the task, there are some challenges of this phase too. One of the most important ones is the coping with the changes that it's brought by the development. This can be biological, emotional, and social. And that's why adolescents use mirrors a lot, because seeing themselves, getting used to their visage and their appearance, and that kind of helps them too. And they are, of course, have to cope with the increased impulses and increased emotional intensity as well. And that is why we see very mood fluctuations during this phase in individuals. An exacerbation of earlier psychological conflicts, especially the Oedipal ones, really brings a lot of challenge for the teenager, because he needs to go over and resolve the Oedipal conflict once again. But the good thing about that, if there had been a problem in the past, a fixation or some other issue, so adolescence now gives an opportunity, provided the available environment, social environment, and the relations, that he can now resolve it in a better way. And they need to make vocational decisions too. And gender roles, bisexual confusion, sexuality, and pregnancy is another area of challenge. And social relations with same and opposite gender friends, especially perhaps more in the Eastern cultures, are important. Sexuality, love, and pregnancy are not a problem of childhood or adulthood, but adolescence. So they have to deal with it. And sense of identity is another very important developmental concept, is the core of a healthy psychological development. And it's obtained through the formation of ego integration, and provides a basis for a sense of self-continuity over time and space, also related to sense of self and personality formation, and is affected by psychosocial and cultural factors a lot. When the sense of identity is failed to form, when there is a failure of gaining this sense, then the adolescent finds himself in a psychiatric state, which we call identity confusion. Identity confusion is considered as the key structure of personality organization for developing psychopathology. And there is enough evidence in the literature now showing this. And it forms the basis, especially of the borderline personality characteristics. And also, maybe the cause of various psychiatric disorders. And gender differences accentuate in adolescence. In children before adolescence, we see psychopathologies more in males than females. But coming to adolescence, the ratio reverses. And now we see more psychiatric disorders or psychological problems in females than males. And this is attributed to the effects of puberty hormones on neural tissue, but as well as the socio-cultural factors too. And another developmental issue is the social identity, and along with comes the moral development, family relations, peer relations, values, religion, and cults, where we see the effects of the culture the most in the development. And that's why we need to consider and examine, evaluate the cultural environment of the adolescent when we are working with them. How society sees adolescence as a distinct stage, in the literature even, but in every culture, I guess, in different countries, this phase is named with a different term. Some of the English terms are listed here, like adolescent, teenager, juvenile, youth, youngster, young person, emerging adult. And children or adults don't have so many various names to be called, but people and in general researchers perhaps kind of needed to use different terms to define, because for a very long time adolescence was not a very known phase of development. It's always considered with the childhood, and there are different methods demarcating from both childhood and adulthood. One of which is the rites and the initiation ceremonies. Initiation ceremonies is still carried on in many cultures, in many countries, which marks the transition from childhood to adolescence. And communities it shows the community's awareness of the change in roles and status as well. It's also an announcement of the child that she is now growing and entering to another stage. There are some other distinct things which differs adolescents from children. They're visual markers. They now have different hairstyles, hair arrangements with beads, wear different ornaments, and they change their dress style. They may have tattoos or piercings. So these are kind of help us differentiate them too. And they are, of course, given new social roles, like specific work tasks or military training or participating in religious functions. So what are the mental health risks during adolescence? As the individuals are at their physical peak, they're also at the peak for psychopathologies. And this is shown in many epidemiological studies as well. Individuals in adolescence are at increased risk of death and disability. And mostly, this is mostly due to reckless behavior and car accidents and mental illness as well. So behavioral issues regarding or related to the development, like aggression and defiance, can lead to some legal problems which threaten the mental health of the adolescent. Or some adolescents feel socially isolated or lonely during this phase if they are not capable in social activities or socially, if they are shy or they have social anxiety. And these feelings can exacerbate feelings of depression and anxiety. Cyberbullying, but in general, actually bullying, because bullying is also a problem that is kind of given importance in the recent years. You know, the papers we read about bullying just being published in the last 10 years or so, and increasing in number. But since the media, social media, and digital communications are now very popular among this population of teenagers, cyberbullying is being done a lot, and it causes anxiety, depression, suicide attempts, even realized suicides, and feelings of helplessness a lot. That needs to be, you know, questioned when examining an adolescent. Academic pressure, social-wise, can lead to significant stress if it's valued a lot by the family or the community. It may lead to burnout, mental exhaustion, anxiety, and depressive symptoms. And identity issues, like struggling with acceptance from peers, family, or society, can lead to mental health challenges as well. And family dynamics, of course, are very important because adolescents are also part of a family. The parental conflict, divorce, or family mental health history can risk the development of healthy coping mechanisms or support systems. The impact of trauma is very important during adolescence, and it is found by many researchers now that it associated with alterations in brain structure, especially sexual abuse during adolescence was found to be associated with abnormalities in late maturing prefrontal cortex, but other type of trauma also affects the development of the limbic system. An increased risk of depression and borderline personality disorder in adulthood is seen a lot. And trauma also leads to conditions like post-traumatic stress disorder and complex trauma-related other issues. There are some psychosocial risks too, like poor social support, or coming from rural areas or from low-income households are all risk for mental health problems. And youth and child welfare or juvenile justice systems and the minority groups are also under greater risk. So what are the psychosocial consequences of mental health problems in adolescence? These problems may lead to poor school performance, that is most frequently seen, and consequently school dropout, and also strains the family relations of the adolescent. And involvement with the child welfare and juvenile justice systems are increased through these problems. As substance or internet dependency, engaging in risky sexual behaviors, and poorer employment outcomes in adulthood is very important. So the problems in adolescence not only are causing problems in this phase, but also have reflections in adulthood and to community as well. You know, Poor employment outcomes means more unemployed people in the community and more negative effect on the economies as well. And if we look at the prevalence of mental disorders in adolescents, this was from a report by Kessler in 2011, but the numbers are even higher now. So he reported that the 1 in 4 to 5 youth in general population has a lifetime mental disorder. That is really big. And 50% of adult mental health disorders begin by age 14 and 75% by age 24. You know, that is really large ratios. That means most of the adolescent, adult psychiatric problems, disorders begin in adolescence. That means we need to take care of the adolescents very well to prevent the mental health problems and psychiatric disorders later in adulthood. This also will contribute again to the economies of the countries. Looking at the prevalence of some specific psychiatric disorders, generally it's been reported on some other researches that 15 of the adolescents worldwide experience a mental disorder. Anxiety disorders seen around 31%, depression about 17%, but you know, it has a range, a varying range as well. And ADHD is reported 9 to 15%. Even in this phase. Eating disorders, especially anorexia nervosa, is a psychiatric disorder which I think is very specific to adolescents because it develops on the psychodynamics of the adolescent development. That is the exacerbation of the Oedipal issues and separation, individuation problems play a very important role in the development of anorexia nervosa in adolescent patients. And it's seen more in females, you know, but the ratio, let's say about 20 or 30 years, was more larger. It was seen more in females, but nowadays the percentage of eating disordered males are also increasing all over the world. Substance use disorders is another issue, you know, and it's reported as 7%. Approximately, but you know, it differs from country to country. It's above 7% in the Western countries, and it's less than 7% in the Eastern countries nowadays, but it's increasing again all over the world. Suicidal thoughts and behaviors is another important issue that we face in adolescence. And 15% of high school students approximately reported serious thoughts of suicide, and about 7% haven't made a plan. This was from a research done, published in Lancet. And suicidal self-injury is, of course, rising up as a major public health problem among adolescents all over the world now. And the prevalence rates are given around 13 to 25, and in some papers even more among high school students. And non-suicidal self-injury and suicidal behavior are contagious among adolescents. And now it's being, you know, talked like NSSI epidemic because it's seen and it's increasing all around the world. So we need to give a lot of effort to understand and evaluate and prevent the self-injurious behavior. What are the consequences of psychiatric disorders? One important issue is that 67,000 adolescents die each year from self-harm. I couldn't believe that when I read that number, but suicide and still is the third leading cause of death for older adolescent girls and boys globally. And depressive disorders, anxiety, behavioral problems, and self-harm are the greatest contributors to young people's burden of disease. And we also have diagnostic difficulties with this age group. The categorical diagnostic systems like DSM and ICD still are very limited, though they included kind of some cultural issues in DSM-5 lately, but it still is not, very comprehensive and very covering for adolescent problems in the clinical sense, and not enough number of valid assessment tools for various problems of this period. And cultural characteristics, again, needs to be considered when evaluating or developing assessment tools. So this age group also have some clinical characteristics which differ them from others. For example, they have sometimes unique presentations of psychiatric disorders. For example, depression can present itself as a form of conduct behavior, like, the child all of a sudden starts rebelling, going to school, or starts running away from home, which seems like a conduct or behavioral problem. But actually, when you talk with them and evaluate the psychodynamics underneath, you understand that actually he is or she suffering from depression. And anxiety disorders most of the time present with hyperactivity, because they're so, they cannot calm themselves down. They look hyperactive, they move around, or there's a lot of attention problems that they complain of. And emotion regulation difficulties, which is seen quite a lot, again, in this age group especially, may present itself with violent behavior. And sometimes the normal developmental manic defenses may be misdiagnosed as a bipolar disorder in adolescence. Thus, we need to, evaluate well, and also, give time to make strict, take time to make before making strict diagnosis with this age group. Coming to the treatment issues, epidemiological studies covers children and adolescents all together. And we don't really have much data of situational analysis of this stage, and it's really very much needed. So that may be an issue that we all need to focus in the future. Evidence-based data should be collected with a culturally relevant perspective again. And in making the medical treatment plans, especially, specific biological characteristics of adolescents, like metabolism rates, needs to be considered. And new intervention strategies needed to be developed for the rising pathologies like NSSI, non-suicidal self-injury. Transition is another important and specific issue related with adolescents. Transition is not a transfer. It's a multidimensional, multidisciplinary, lengthy process continuing on into adult care. And it needs to be coordinated, planned, efficient, and smoothly done. So, and it needs to be, we should be aware that it's a dynamic process with a beginning, middle, and end. At the and the young people may need help during going through this process. And there are, of course, some specific policy needs of this age group too, and especially addressing to their mental health needs. And considering families, peers, and school staff as stakeholders of policy programs will be very important. And skills training, media literacy, and most risky issues should have priority in the policy programs. If we just have a look at the mental health needs, so early identification and intervention of the problems through screening and assessment, and also increasing the availability of access to services will be very important. Supportive environments are needed for the teenagers, safe spaces and peer support programs. Education and awareness, especially mental health education involving parents and teachers, will be beneficial. And access to mental health professionals is not easy or available in very many countries. So this needs to be thought about and increased too. And socioeconomic factors and cultural issues, again, other mental health needs to be taken care of. And coping skills like life skills training and resilience building with extracurricular activities will be very important too, as well as being careful about eating disorders and making early diagnosis of the frequently seen problems in adolescence, and crisis intervention. And with all these issues, adolescent sitting at the crossroad of childhood and adulthood, the adolescent has unique developmental characteristics, has specific needs, mental health needs especially, faces major challenges and risks, suffer much more of psychiatric disorders, requires state-specific diagnostic systems and assessment methods, needs treatment strategies based on culturally relevant evidence-based data, and deserves mental health policy programs which prioritize the needs of these young people. Thus, we need psychiatrists, psychologists, and other mental health professionals working for adolescents. Thank you for your interest in adolescent mental health. And I would like to invite you to become a member of isapp to work together for adolescents. And this is our email address, info.isappmh@gmail.com, where you can send a message to get an application form for membership. And membership is free, by the way. And we're looking forward to working with many of you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Füsun, for this very interesting intervention talk, focusing on the importance of investigating, knowing, and taking care of adolescents. We have some time for some questions. Can open a discussion, and we are open to proposals coming from the audience. Is anyone willing to make a comment? Özlem.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your inspiring presentation, Ms. Hocam. I would like to ask, the common problem for psychiatrists who deal with adolescents is adolescents come with I have a ADHD. Every adolescent come to us, even now adults.
Yeah.
I have,
Internet.
yes, yes, yes.
Professor Google knows everything, you know.
Yeah. So, do you if you give any advice to us to how, of course, we clinically differentiate the anxiety and the ADHD, but do you prefer to make some tests for adolescents, cognitive assessment tests for adolescents to make believe them this diagnosis?
Oh, okay. First, I would like to evaluate her or him, very well. Of course, going through the symptoms, other symptoms of ADHD. And of course, as you mentioned, it will be very important to make a differential diagnosis of anxiety disorder. If they have a stressor or another factor, contributing or producing anxiety, then we should first go for the treatment of the anxiety issue. And when you explain it to them, they usually understand and they admit that they are feeling anxious because they are kind of trying to search for their symptoms in Google, because that's what they feel. They try to make a meaning of the things they are feeling, and they come up to us with what they found on Google. Oh, this symptom I feel, this thing I feel, and is called that. So I need a treatment for this. But when you explain them, you see, you have such and such things happened in your life, and those might have caused a lot of stress to you. And it's very understandable that you're feeling anxious about such and such things. So I think it's not ADHD you're having, but because you're so anxious, you cannot concentrate well, because you're kind of also feeling perhaps helpless, that you can't sit still and calm yourself down. And this happens when you are feeling anxiety. It's not always ADHD. So let's try to decrease your anxiety and relieve you, with different methods you can suggest. It can be a psychotherapeutic intervention or a kind of medical intervention, but it's better. I don't usually prefer giving them the test at the beginning, because if sometimes some of them are very obsessed with the diagnosis they made about themselves, and they will try to prove you that they had made the correct diagnosis. So they can manipulate the tests, very easily. So that wouldn't work out well. I wouldn't do that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions or comments, perhaps? Anything you would like to add? Mario, Enrico, and Annette is here too, and Eiko.
How do you think that about the fact of cultural influences, how do you think, speaking of our international society that connects different cultures and all over in the world, that there are specific cultural